tried last time, I tried to change the resolution while the stream was live, and on my screen it looks like it's changing to a lower resolution, but it's still the same resolution because you can't adjust the resolution in while the live
On
stream.
the fly.
Yeah, you have to stop it and then go. Okay, so there we go.
Yeah,
Oh,
you said that's better. Yeah.
We'll figure it out. We'll get it.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Good work, studio boss.
Yes.
Sorry, so
there were a few podcasts floating around for a while there, and you're still the only one kind of persevering with it, so it's good, you know. Yeah, but perseverance always wins.
Yeah, but you know what I think happened with the COVID, the China virus. We had this situation where, where everybody decided to get involved in the live stream, and now that the China virus is gone, we can sort of get back into normal life, and that's why people do it. So now we're running beautifully. There we go. I figured it out, guys. Thank you.
No crickets.
I did interrupt the major discussion about the black-headed python eggs, because that's something that. Remember earlier this season, me and you had a chat about the blackheads and how you struggled to get them going. What were you guys busy discussing while I got totally distracted and didn't listen one bit? I'm so sorry about that.
We're just saying how amazing Brent is at breeding blackheadeds and how much I suck. That's all.
Oh, yeah.
Just the pairing and the egg incubation process. Not really about once they're out. Once they're out, that's a whole nother world of pain, getting them feeding and established well. Because they're just not something that wants to eat rodents, out of the egg. They're in the wild. They certainly wouldn't be chasing around rodents when they're that small.
Yeah, so, no animal does. No python really would be, would they? But funny you say that. Not that I have much experience, but the male I got given was a hatchling, and I bought him cheap because he was a non-feeder. I just put 2 pinky wraps in his mouth twice, and then he was off. Away he went.
Off and going. Yep. Yeah. When they kick in, they're fantastic. Once they take, look out, they're an unreal feeding machine. But some I've struggled with badly. Manise and I talked about different methods, and he gave me a little tip that got a couple going last year really well. They're just one of those things that aren't as simple as a carpet, and not as tough. I thought carpet's near unbreakable. They can go 10 months without food and somehow still kick into food and live a normal life. Certainly don't get that out of Antaresia, and blackheads. I've had a couple that just won't go.
Yeah, Antaresia are pretty bad at losing weight rapidly. If you can't keep food in them, they die off pretty fast.
Yep,
and
not much of them to start with.
Yeah,
that tip that I gave you, that people will kill for that. So we will, it's a trade secret, isn't it? Huh?
This is a carpet show. We can't release the
information.
You'll have to wait for the Asphodite show.
It's off topic, so who cares? Who cares about that? So you guys have all got clutches starting and stuff. So what should? So a good question. A lot of people always ask. When eggs start showing fungus on them, if they start growing fungus, when do you give up on? When do you give up on eggs? Do you guys remove your eggs, or do you put foot powder, foot fungus powder on it, or what do you guys do to eggs to get them back to going to life? Or do you just pull them out, or did you let them go dead or die, or what do you do with them?
Me personally, I leave them. Like once the clutch is in the tub in the incubator, if an egg goes, it goes. And over years, when you produce enough, like if an entire clutch dies, I believe it's destined to. I don't think it matters what you do. I've heard of people putting all sorts of stuff on the eggs and wiping it all off and all that sort of stuff. As long as there's not, there's not that much moisture in it that the condensation on the lid is dropping onto the eggs and perhaps sitting in a divot in the egg or something like that. As long as the eggs are dry inside that thing, I think if those eggs are destined not to hatch, it doesn't matter what you do. They're gonna go off and die and go moldy. I've had
I agree with that.
Whole clutches, 3 eggs go off, they go completely green with mold, and you leave them there, and the rest of the clutch hatches perfectly fine with no problems whatsoever. So and that's not a one-off, that's multiple clutches. So if that's the scenario, and then you have a clutch that gets mold and all those eggs die, I think that's just nature. Those eggs probably weren't destined to hatch no matter what you do.
I agree. Yeah.
Tell me, can you guys just check? Has any of you got sound coming out of your computer? Has anybody you got like a screen open where the sound is on?
Nope.
I'm getting an echo, and I can't seem to figure out if it's on my side or your side, but that's okay. So, Andy, how do you treat eggs that start to look a bit shaky?
Exactly the same as Daz. I mean, if they start going off, I leave them till they're pretty much, putrid. You can kind of see that there's no coming back. And then if I can easily pull them out, I will. But I mean, sometimes they're trapped in the middle of a clutch that's stuck together, and then I'll just leave them. I mean, yeah, I'm the same as Daz. I've had plenty of eggs that have gone bad, and they stay in there and go the whole way through the incubation, and they don't affect the other eggs. As long as the others are healthy and strong, they make it through. Stuck to a moldy one doesn't seem to make a difference.
And you, Brent?
Yeah, much the same. I'd separate all my eggs and lay them all flat on a tray anyway. So if one goes bad, I'll certainly push stuff aside so it's not touching anything. But exactly the same. If an egg's going to go bad, it's going to go bad internally, not from external, pressures that come onto it. So it's I'll certainly pull stuff out if it's going bad and you can feel it's gone hard inside. I'll chuck stuff out midway through. But right now in there, I was just looking before the show, there was 2 or 3 little Antaresia clutches where an egg has totally imploded, moldy, gone to dust almost, still attached to 3 eggs around it, which are perfect. So it's.
I've got a couple of ant clutches the same where, half the clutch is rotten, basically.
Yeah.
And the other, 4 or 5 eggs on the other side are still white, still whole.
Yeah.
They've been in there, God knows how long they were in the drawer for when I pulled them out. And they've been in there for the couple of weeks I've been home and haven't changed.
Yeah.
So,
I think people panic thinking that that mold's going to spread, but I think those eggs were going bad anyway. It's just a matter of time they were going to go bad anyway.
Hey, Corey. Yeah.
Oh, can you guys see the messages on there?
Yeah, we can see them.
It just pops up. Yep.
Do you want fries with that, Colin?
There's one there for you. Darren Boswell says, by the smell, I pulled a few eggs this year from mold, but left them until they smelled bad. Yeah, that's, of course, smell is another good indication that the eggs off.
Yeah, once they stink, you're pretty much done. But I like those blackheads we were just discussing before. There's 2 eggs in there that I presumed were very bad. One went bad very early, and I left it right there until they all hatched, and it is putrid. Like, that tub reeked, And yet one other one with a little bit of mold on it, that I think the things died late. And when I cut it open, fully formed animal with pattern, still starting to stink, but just leave it there. It's not going to hurt anything. So
I think I saw this week somebody post a photo of a clutch of eggs that they've got that went the distance. But this, I always used to take a little bit of that talcum powder and just sort of powder it on, with a little brush or something over the egg. This guy, this person literally just took the powder and just shook it over.
Unleashed hell.
Looks like a baby's bum.
Looks like snow, It's like you could sniff that shit right off the eggs, It's like everywhere. So, I thought but the eggs made it. I always thought, want to cover it with a toxin, to the point where the egg can't breathe. But if it works, it works. Learn something new every day.
Eggs that are good will get through pretty bad conditions and still hatch.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
We got Glenn said hello, Zach, Brendan, Faye. Hey guys.
Yeah, somebody says here, Michael Ward Grod says, so what you are saying is mold grows on the eggs that have gone off. It is not the mold that makes the egg go off. No,
yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly right.
Inside out. Yeah.
I have noticed though, when eggs start to go off, when they unfixable. Is there a word like unfixable? Sorry, English.
Irreversible. You were getting there.
I'm struggling with the English tonight. I don't know what's going on with me, mate. But I have noticed with eggs though, when they start to almost look, they form these like transparent patches on them, and they get like a yellow tinge to them, like almost a transparent look to them. Those are the eggs you can't fix.
Yeah, they're gone.
I've had some that have sort of had that have kind of made it all the way through. I know you're saying a lot of them do go off, but I've had the odd one that'll make it. Yeah.
Was it early or later on in the incubation that they started?
Yeah, probably later on, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to.
I think there's a tipping point where the embryo gets to the size where they sort of turn into an animal that can push through. You know, like if it's, I don't know. Maybe I'm not coming across properly. I should
Yeah,
just.
no, I get that. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Most of those ones do normally go off, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've definitely had because I've watched a lot of them as well, thinking, oh, what a shame, you know, this is an important clutch, and then you have the occasional one that makes it. So yeah.
Like,
One thing I've always found quite fascinating is animals that go to wrap up the clutch, as they often do, and then they leave one or two or three, maybe a few more off to the side, and you think, oh, silly thing, it just couldn't wrap them up. But then when you pick them up and go to incubate them, you know, probably 99% of the time those eggs go off, and you think, that snake knew. Like, that snake somehow knew that those eggs were bad from the start.
I mean, that's not you see that quite a bit. You'll often see snakes that have. I mean, I set aside comments for a snake that has laid a clutch and doesn't know what to do with it, and they've just left it, because I've hatched clutches like that and had no problems with them hatching out. However, one that's caught up and has pushed a few aside, you look at them and go, they look all right. Often you can candle them and you think they look all right. But often you stick them separate and it's like, oh, the clump goes all right, but why are these ones all going off? And,
isn't it amazing? I did a bit of research on that because I was trying to figure out how could the snake possibly know, and I thought, oh, maybe heartbeat, because it's the first thing that usually develops in the embryo, but it takes about 5 days or so before the heartbeat starts, you know, so there's no way that they are doing it on that. So I really have no idea how the snake knows that they're no good.
The skin feels the same. Like, to touch those eggs, they feel perfectly formed. It's not like they come out squishier or hard of shell or anything. So,
but I had to mention something though. I did take a gravid female down to Shane Simpson, the vet, a few years back, and because I wasn't sure if she was egg bound or not. And he literally did there's ultrasound equipment that can literally see if there's blood supply, if there's actual a blood flow system in an egg. So what he did was he actually ultrasounded the female, and he could see that there was blood circulation in the eggs, and he could say by the fact that there was blood circulation in the eggs that the female was still okay. Apparently, if you scan a female that is egg bound, the eggs die normally. So he can scan past that point of where it should have been laid. The eggs they just don't make it. The babies the embryos die. Because at a certain point they need to start absorbing oxygen. So he said and then I think I took another female down there at one stage as well. There was definitely egg bound, and he scanned her and he said, look, those eggs are all dead. So it's pretty safe to assume that. So right from it, just to tie into you, Andy, saying that the heartbeat starts, within a few days' time, there is actually a venous system in the egg by the time that it gets laid. And I was just going to say to Brent that clutch of from that zebra jag she laid a few separate. Have you scandaled those? The ones that she lay aside, are those eggs
from this year, or
yeah.
They would be in the tub. I would have marked them and put them separate. I normally just stack everything in little rows and push the weird ones, I think, out to the side. Yeah. So I don't know. They could be good, could be bad.
Because it'd be interesting to see if the ones that she laid on the tub itself, if they were healthy, and the ones that she kept on the top of that tub, on that high of her nest box, if those eggs are good.
Yeah, they're only a couple of weeks in, so I'll check on those and see. But I find the ones that are out generally are not good, and it's a mystery how they know.
Here's a question: what about the eggs that look okay but have the hard yellow-looking cone on one end, but the rest looks fine? How many of? Hold on.
You mean booby eggs?
The booby, yeah.
How many of them survive? I got a few tonight in a clutch out of a ghost that went 34 days past pre-lay.
Yeah, I think it's. Oh, sorry, that's There you go.
Whatever. I was going to say, I think it's subject to the size of the hard bit, the booby end of it. Like if the eggs say 80 or 90% okay, and it's just a little bit on the end, I've seen many of those hatch. But if it's just a tiny little bit of good egg and the rest is bad, I think you go to the other end of the scale. I think there's a balance. Once
Yeah, I think
50%. I don't know if there's a specific point at which way they go good or bad.
It's well worth incubating them. Put it that way.
Yeah,
well worth putting them in the incubator. But I haven't had too many of them. But it's hit and miss, like Daz says. Some will definitely make it through, but don't be surprised if the rest go bad.
Yeah, I always incubate them. I chuck them in, unless like I said, if it's 90% crappy egg, and the other end, you can normally tell. Well, that's shit. You know what I mean? Like just toss it. But if there's a good portion, at least 50% that is good white, healthy looking egg, I'll throw it in. If it goes off, you haven't lost anything. But if it hatches, well, you've had a win.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Bryce, to answer your question, it's still going. Bryce has asked if any update
Yeah, I'll
on
put it up. There we
the
go.
albino silver pepper. Yeah, I actually just got it back today because I was away for 3 months. It's been looked after. Prick won't eat. It's assist feeding / forced feeding, but it's growing. It's still kicking. I just wish the thing would eat to get some size on it, to get some colour. Like it does look quite nice, but obviously still being quite small for the amount of food it's taken in. But yeah, it's still going.
Yeah,
Is it eaten by itself at all, or are you still assisting it?
Nah, it's kind of assist feeding. You put something in its mouth and it'll eat it. You try to offer it, and it has, for my last attempts, like pretty much zero response. It just kind of looks at it, and it's almost too placid. You can't get it angry enough to get that snap and bite that you can if you agitate. Some carpets or ants, whatever it is, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you're not feeding, you can sometimes rub them on the back, give them a tap in behind the back of the neck, sort of thing, to try and get that reaction
Yeah.
snap. And no, it just looks at it and goes, no,
It's got
I'm not
nothing.
interested. Yep.
Yeah.
You pick it up, you open its mouth, put a head in, gentle pressure on the jaw, and just kind of pull the pinky out a little bit to just try and lock it in the teeth, and put it down. It'll try to get it out sometimes, and it'll go. If it can't get it out, it'll sit there and go, oh, it's food, and just eats it, and it just goes and curls up in the corner.
But how have you guys found that? Like, I remember I bred a few hundred albinos, and did you ever find that albinos in general are a little bit harder to get going than your standard carpet?
I always found mine good.
Sometimes.
50-50.
Oh, no, mine I probably get 90% of my clutches going really fast, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, and albinos as well.
Yeah, albinos. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think it depends on the clutch. I've had clutches that have hatched, like, for some reason, just placid, and you can slap them. You can do all sorts of stuff with them, and they're not interested. And on the other extreme, I've had clutches, and I've been breeding them for probably 10 years now.
Yeah.
Albinos. And then you get other clutches, even when they've come out of the egg and you're popping them to sex, and they're biting your fingers and everything else that goes around and shitting and crapping themselves and doing what they do. And they feed no worries. And other years you get half that you offer at the first feed and they're bang straight onto it, and the next other 5 sit there and you're force feeding them for 3 months, and then all of a sudden that one day you offer them a food and just bang they're onto it, and they never look back from that point.
Do you breed from head to albino or albino to albino, Andy?
For many years it was het to albino, but now it's albino to albino, and I've actually got rid of a lot of my albinos, but I used to have about 7 or 8 breeders going, so, and they were all albinos, and they were all pretty much all fathered by one male. He's my oldest albino. He's probably 9 or 10 years old now. He was the first one I ever bought, and he's still there, going strong. He's a massive animal, and he can easily be put over that many animals. He's fantastic. So it could be something to do with his genetics, maybe, and a lot of the girls I'm putting him over are now his siblings too. So yeah.
How many? What did you start it on? What did you start feeding them with? Oh, sorry. I like successes.
I 100% of my carpets on pinky rats. Every single one, from jungles to diamonds, everything starts on pinky rats, and then it's only when I really get to a point that I'm struggling, to get those fussy ones feeding, I might try a mouse, but I will try live and things as well, just to get them going, and then of course I will switch back to frozen thawed up once they're going. And I often find if you leave a live pinky in overnight, that often helps, so things like that.
I've had that advantage for years as well, having the ability.
I was going to say that is an advantage of breeding your own rodents, Daz? You can get live stuff quite easily. So
How long after they hatch so that you start offering food, Andy?
I usually wait until, of course, they've had their first shed, and then I might wait up to a month. 4 weeks.
Oh, okay.
You know what? It's 100% true. I found in the early days of breeding, like I'd almost get impatient before the things have even had their first shed, and you're trying to feed them. And I've actually had snakes that would eat at that point in time, like literally not even a week out of the egg, and they'll start to feed.
Yep.
And that was a habit I got into. And then, as your collection grows, as things get busy, you can't, you get 10 clutches hatch out over the course of a week or two. You can't try to get them all feeding at the same time. And I found that by actually waiting till they've had that shed and giving them at least another 2 to 3 weeks, I find, I don't know whether you're the same, Andy, but I found that there's this almost like a week period that if you get it on the right period, 99% will eat the first time you offer them food.
Yeah.
And I think when they've had the shed and you're trying to feed them straight away, you will have some success for sure.
Yeah.
But I found almost like you let them go a little bit longer, they've kind of settled down, they've warmed up, they've had a shed, they're cruising around, they've had a couple of weeks to maybe get hungry, so to speak.
Yep.
And they just seem to be more interested in smashing food. But when you go beyond that, if you go too long, I have found that they can also then become difficult again to get feeding.
Yeah.
So it's just that's what I found.
I agree with you, Dad.
Live is huge.
I had 1 year. I had a couple of baby hatchlings that went 9 months without feeding. I had some that had a meal. Like I found that they can go, if they don't start to eat at all, they can go a lot longer than when they've had 1 or 2 meals. It's almost like when as soon as their metabolism gets triggered, they can then they need food to sustain themselves. If they sort of go through and these were all Murray stuff, so it's sort of almost. It was strange because the Murrays in the wild have got a later hatching season, don't they, Darren?
Yeah, mine.
Later, yeah. So I like to look at their natural history, and I might be talking totally out of my ass at the moment. I sort of thought that some of them were born really late in the season, and it's sort of they just didn't look like they wanted to start going. So the ones that I assist fed didn't go that long, and they just ended up dying. And then the ones that didn't have any food, they went 9 months no feed, and then I gave them a rat pinky. They took it. They didn't want to start by themselves. And then one night I had frozen rat pinkies, and I just walked out, and I thought, I'll just throw it in there and just leave it. And they literally, I came back 20 minutes later, and they ate those frozen rat pinkies. I thought it was real strange. But those little snakes went 9 months without any food, because I just went, look, if something doesn't want to eat by it, I was pretty hardcore when it came to breeding carpet snakes. I always just thought, if something doesn't want to thrive, then it's usually I feel like we try too hard to make a poor feeder viable, and eventually it just adds to the burden on the you put struggling to thrive animals into the hobby, then their offspring also tend to give issues.
True, but if they're going to pet keepers, it's not too bad. I've got a guy I give some of my strugglers to, and he's happy to deal with them. But you obviously can't do that with huge numbers. Again, you definitely don't want to be breeding from them. I know Simon Stone seemed to be very convinced that you could breed for better food response by selecting the best breeders constantly. However, I know Michael Cermak, I think he was disagreeing with that principle. So, there's a bit of who knows if it's true or not.
Well, there's plenty of that proof in trait breeding in animals all around the place. You look at rats and mice. I know when I started early, 15 years ago, breeding rats and mice, I thought it was normal to have ones that wanted to eat your fingers when they had a litter and all that. And someone told me back then, they said, "Oh no, just knock them on the head. Like anything that tries to bite you, knock it on the head. Get rid of it. Don't worry about it." And I have maintained that philosophy through all my rodent breeding. And I have told people, with any of the rats that I've had, pick a tub and I'll pull any one out and I'll hold in my hand and go, "Here you go."
Yeah.
Because I've bred that, vicious or defensive, whatever way you want to look at it, trait out of the rodents.
Yeah.
I also read one on foxes. They actually did a study on, line breeding for those sort of traits. sure it was on foxes in England, I think it was.
Yeah.
And they bred the aggression out of the foxes. So any foxes that became more amenable to humans and more friendly and showed the right traits they were looking for, they selected those to go into the breeding program. And they proved over time you could turn a wild fox into a lovely pet, no different to
That's exactly
your
how
Kelpie,
we got
your fluffy dog, whatever.
lines, isn't it, Daz? You know, that's how we got dogs and cats and white rats and all that sort of thing. So,
And
yeah.
I honestly don't think it's any different. I mean, we can breed a snake for visual traits, whether it's polygenic or for line breeding for stripes or whatever it is. But I think the same thing if you take snakes, and I think a lot of this, you look at the numbers of, say, corn snakes in the US, where they literally defrost a pinky and they just throw it in the tub. They don't even offer it to them and sit there and try to get them to feed. They literally just throw it in the tub, and the things just eat. You can't tell me that that's something that hasn't been developed in those snakes through captive breeding for
sure.
30 odd years in the mass numbers that they get produced in.
But haven't you guys noticed how, if you think 10 years ago, how, it was an achievement to make carpets, like even let's go 15 years back. It was like when people bred carpets, we were like, oh yeah, that's, good stuff, Now it seems to, I think from breeding snakes in captivity, it's become easier for people to breed. It's like their snakes are easier to breed now. Have you found that? You think it's almost like the animals have become more domesticated, and they accept their surroundings a little bit better now, and they breed. Like you can have somebody come into the reptile hobby in their first year and have a clutch of eggs.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think online resources are, of course, a lot easier to access. I know I'm almost certain that probably when Daz and I Daz has been doing it longer than me, but I know that even when I started, there was basically nothing online. I mean, the internet had only just been invented, really. I mean, I got my first snake in like 99 or something, and I think, I saw that comment, yeah.
Yeah, they don't breed very well, apparently.
There's a few questions there. Should we go through and answer some of them? Or?
Yeah, let's. Brent's just been sitting there quiet. I don't know what he's doing. He's probably tired from working today. So you did work today, didn't you, mate?
I did work today. Yeah, no, I'm listening.
So I'm trying to get a word in here, and these guys just keep going. Oh, sorry, mate.
I know Darren talks so much. It's just so hard to work with some days.
Here's a question. Here's a question for you, Brent. Here's one for you. From Wal Roberts. If you had a carpet that was born with no eyes but had the color and marking you had been trying to achieve, would you breed it? I think is the rest of that question. Yeah, would you still grow it out and breed it? Yeah? What do you reckon?
Well, we've seen with olives that had a lot of those issues. They got outcrossed and fixed some of those problems. I know a guy who had a super zebra, I believe, that had no eyes. Something else was not right with it too. And it struggled. It didn't really do well. Hard to get feeding. If it was something,
you wouldn't imagine that, eh?
If it was an amazing genetically thing that you'd have to try, but if that issue just passed straight on to the next generation, you couldn't outcross it to fix it. I would try, but whether successfully. I mean, the olives were one that had issues with eyes, and they've been outcrossed and fixed now. So it certainly is possible. If someone's got a pied carpet out there with no eyes, I'll gladly take it for an experiment.
Maybe a pitch black Murray Darling.
They're everywhere these days. They're common.
Sorry. I had to do that. We all know the drama behind the animal. The truth shall set you free. That's what they say, isn't it? Let me see if I can find here's a question from Nina Markwell. I'll read the question.
G'day, Nina.
Nina says, hi. I have a rescued albino Darwin that was fed chicken necks, and she was small for her size. Will she get to a normal size or be smaller as she has good feed pattern with me? I don't know. A good feed pattern with me.
That's a funny one. I have a theory, and I don't know what it is, but I've had animals that have gone for 12 months and haven't fed, right? So let's say for whatever reason, and they get to like 12 months of age and they're still the size of a shoelace, a danger noodle. So they're still hatchling size. And then they
say noodle.
Yeah. The most let's
Unplug Darren now.
Let's
Yeah.
just not go there. Oh,
A danger noodle, huh? Yeah, okay.
and
Go ahead.
I have
Go ahead.
found that once they start to feed, it is almost like, and I can't. Maybe someone else can explain this to me. It is almost like they need to eat that 12 months of food that they've missed out on to catch them up to where they are before they really start to power on.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
I've seen it in animals that get to a certain size, and if they haven't fed well for whatever reason, and you start throwing food in them, it's almost like it takes a few months for them to realize, okay, for 2 years I've hardly had enough energy to put into growth. Now
Yeah.
suddenly I'm getting food, but I'm not sure if it's going to be constant, so I'm not going to put it into growth yet. I'll just shit it out, and all of a sudden they'll take off and grow. I don't know what it is, but I've
I
found
don't think
that
they
on
ever
so
catch
many
up.
snakes.
I think things that feed bad never ever get to where animals feed well. You know, I've seen it with holdbacks where something's turned off and hasn't eaten. That first 18 months is key development time for them. And I feel if they don't grow well in that time, they never catch up. Like I've got sisters down there that are one's 6 kilos and one's 2.5 kilos, same age, obviously, and trying to breed them. And it doesn't matter what I try and push into the one that, you know, didn't eat well from the start. It just will not grow to the size of the other one. So
Is
it's
it
like they're
eating well,
stunted. Eats perfectly now.
Yeah.
So, you know,
But it's like what we discussed today, Brent, when we spoke. You know, we've all had males that we've paid particular attention to, and we've given them more food, and we've nurtured them and grown them quickly and stuff. And then they get to breeding size, and then they just don't do anything.
Yep.
You know, like we had it a few years back where I missex something, and that's how you quickly learn how to pop sex and stuff. That was when I just when I was only doing probe sexing, and I literally thought those males were females. So we fed them like females that had, they were real nice, and we thought these girls had to get big. And then when they reached about 1.5 kilos in that first year and a half, or I think they could have even been more. I popped it one day, and it turned out to be a male, and those males have done nothing. So it's a fine line between. It's like Darren says, some of them just never thrive. I almost want to say that you need to figure out what. I don't think there's a recipe for. I don't think you can overdo anything or underdo anything. It needs to there's people that swear by one every 10 days. I used to feed. Somebody told me years back when I just started with carpets, don't keep them, grow them slowly, and they better breeders. And then you that first year I grew them real slowly, and they never had the growth rate that something had that got good solid feeds from early on.
I think that's true. I think you should be feeding young animals fast, because in the wild, their whole purpose is to get as big as they can, as fast as they can, so they're at the top of the food chain, and so that they can reproduce and things like that.
It's they actually did a study on growth rates at UWS on Antaresia a number of years back, over several years, and they fed 3 different food lots. So one was minimal, one was in between, and one was fed to refusal.
Yeah.
And what they found was the metabolic rates across all the I think it was like 40 or 50 they did at UWS. Metabolic rates were all the same.
Yeah.
Right. The difference was the ones that only had a small amount of food didn't have the energy to put into growth. So even though they were utilizing the food, that food was utilized to keep themselves alive. Now, the ones that were fed, say, from hatchling, let's say 3 pinkies as opposed to 1, they had not only food to keep them alive, but to put into growth. Most of those ones that went through that trial bred at 18 months of age, as opposed to others that weren't much bigger than hatchies at the same age.
Yeah.
So the metabolic rates within those animals was across the board the same.
Yeah.
Obviously within give or takes.
Yeah.
But because they're being fed more, they have more energy. And in that first couple of years, which is understood that's when the pythons do the most amount of their growing.
Yeah.
It was they were just able to use that energy to grow. So they were massive by the time they were 18 months of age, because they were fed to refusal. And they also found that most of them got to a point where it wouldn't matter how much you offered to feed. They got to a point where they started to cycle themselves. So they actually started to then refuse the feed.
So
So
they
they go in there and feed them.
do you know if they restricted their space usage as well?
No,
Or they
no.
all kept in the same size enclosure?
Same thing, suitable for their size. Obviously,
Yeah.
you're not going to keep one that's 3 feet long in the same size as one that's a hatchie. But yeah, as they grew, they moved into suitable enclosures and everything. And most went on to breed. They kept them on for a number of years before they stopped doing the project and sold most of them off. But yeah, it was a metabolic study on their rate. So
I guess if you really want to know this stuff, there's such like Andy said earlier, the information's at the tip of your fingertips. You just need to actually not go on Facebook and look it up on Facebook. You can find papers on the internet, Google Scholar. You go in there, type your keywords in, and it will spit you out a whole bunch of documents of studies that have been done that you can nitpick what you want to know out of it, but you need to read. You need to read stuff, and you need to you can always extrapolate stuff from other species and apply it to as long as it's within the reptiles. You can use information from other species to apply it to different species. I mean, it's not exclusive. That's what a lot of people think. If it's not what I'm keeping, then why should I be listening?
So Vinny asked a question: which of those lived longer? I know some of those that were power fed are still kicking along today, and that would have been done. God, I was waiting for would have been mid 2000, maybe 6 or 7, or 2005 or 6 or something like that. From memory.
One thing I'll say is about the Antaresia, though, that's an interest, like that. Well, it might not also pertain to carpets and things, because Antaresia naturally coexist within carpet python and Aspidites range, but their evolutionary advantage is to power feed, grow fast, and reproduce much earlier than all their larger cousins. That's what they're designed to do. So therefore, a study on them, that you would think that those ones that were power fed would thrive and do everything a lot better.
Yeah, but then all right, you take before cane toads, water pythons, Fog Dam. Yeah. One of the fastest growing pythons in the world because of their ratio to plains rats. They were capable of breeding at 18 months of age.
Yep.
Wild water pythons. So another scenario where you've got a larger species of python that was still capable of getting to 18 months of age and breeding. So I don't believe, they're opportunistic feeders. If they happen to hatch in a booming season where everything's right, and they hatch out and there is just plagues of mice or skinks or whatever it is, respective to the species that they are eating, they're going to eat. And if they can eat, 3 times a week when they're a hatchie, or 4 times a week, I think they're going to. It's only when they're completely engorged and can't fit anymore and can hardly move that they're just going to sit there until that meal's digested. And you look at your hatchie racks, you can go in there and feed on a Monday, give them a decent meal, and if they've got the right temperatures and situation, 3 days later, they're at the front looking for more food. And that meal's digested and gone down.
It makes sense that their metabolism would be faster as well when they're younger. It'd be like kids.
Yeah, sure.
Put everything they put into them is for growth purposes. So,
seeing as we're onto this sort of thing, I actually read another article. I can't remember where it was, but it was on metabolic rates. A python that has no food in its stomach can have not metabolic rates. What was the word? Basically, can turn their metabolism off. So basically, there's nothing. They have no food. They're not digesting anything. So their stomach, unlike us, their stomach doesn't develop acids and everything to digest. So it shuts down. But when they eat, I can't remember where.
I remember that study. It's where they literally absorb all the blood out of their organs if it's not used for digestion or for.
And then when they eat, they can turn their rate up 4,000% to digest a meal. So that's a massive difference. So when you've got something, and we talk about, feeding every 3 or 4 days, however you want to call it, if that animal's used to getting that much food and that metabolism rate's kicking it that long, you imagine their growth rates. Like they're just pumping food and now just energy to grow, and they're shedding every 3 weeks or 4 weeks. Yeah. They're just powering on.
Can
You
I
know,
say, like, there's someone here that says,
Yeah, there's a couple. Let's look.
Sorry.
Look at
doesn't the ones that are power fed affect them negatively? Yeah, that's probably yes and no, because wouldn't in the wild they're obviously going to, like you said, Daz, I agree, they're going to be optimistic feeders and take as much food as they can. However, as keepers, we can often keep that going for maybe 2 years, keep them on heat. But whereas in the wild, they're going to go through a winter period where they slow down, or a season where their prey disappears, of course, things like that. So, what do you guys think? Do you think that if we, as keepers, constantly power feed them for, say, 2 or possibly even 3 years, that could negatively affect them?
Brent,
I think if you go past 2 years, you're going to have problems. You know, like if
100%.
you can keep them on heat, grow them fast. After 2 years, fatty cells in them, you're going to see fatty liver disease. You're going to see deaths from obesity. So I think in the first 18 months, I did read a study from a uni up the coast years ago that similar thing with carpets. They killed a heap of them off at 18 months old that had fed at different rates. And basically, even the most power-fed animal at 18 months had very little fat stores in its body. After, you take something to 2.5 years and it's absolutely full of fat cells. It was just, putrid condition. So, yeah, definitely, I think at up to 18 months, you're fine. After that, you really need to feed to suit the condition of the animal.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Well, that's when you hit your 2 years, you're getting to that adult point of a life. Its growth rate slows down. You can continually push that amount of food in there. The snake's not using that energy to grow anymore. It will continue to grow over the entirety of its life as they do. But you're right. Once you get a snake to an adult size, that's when it comes down to balancing. My males, during feeding season, might get fed once, every 3 weeks on average. They might get a feed every couple of weeks after breeding season. Then they might not get fed for a month. And I don't actually look at records of feeding. I look at conditions of the animal. So when I look at my boys, I look at it and go, "Oh, you're looking a bit lean from last season. I'm going to give you a bit more feed, and I'll give him a little bit more size and weight, not fat, but healthy." And you're looking for a nice shape to the body. That nice, arches either side of the spine, and good tone, good health, good weight. The females,
Golden arches.
Let me just
golden arches. Can I take?
I don't want to. There's James Bindoff said something here. He said, "Is there not 2 theories on power feeding in small, regularly 3 to 5 days to where largest possible given 7 to 10 days?"
I've tried both, funny enough, and I don't think it makes a difference. I've made huge snakes both ways. And funny enough, some of the biggest holdbacks I've had have been mice feeders that have eaten nothing but mice, wouldn't take rats, and end up chaining 3 or 4 mice, jumbo mice, together at 18 months old to get a decent feed into them. And they've been bigger than things that have eaten rats straight off the bat.
Yeah, I agree as well. Like, I've tried multiple regimes, and I remember trying like 4 rats in a week sort of thing. I did that for 6 months, and then like small ones, and then dropping down to 1. I didn't really notice any difference in growth rates as long as they were getting food intake of some kind. They were growing, So
whether it's 50 grams of 5 mice or 50 grams of a jumbo mice, it's 50 grams of food.
Yeah.
The only difference I will say to that is your pinhead syndrome. You'll see people go, "Oh, look at the size of the carp, it's got a tiny little head." And the difference is, I think Jonathan Howard, Beardy Vet, did a study on it a long time ago. Yeah. And if you actually feed your snakes a decent meal, and it actually has to work to get that food down. So if it could eat a pinky rat, no worries, and it gets down looking for a second one, feed it a fuzzy rat. And if it's got to work that little bit harder, all the muscles in the jaw have to work harder to get that food item down. It stretches and grows, obviously not the bones, but it's working the head a lot harder to get that food item down. And the head will grow proportionate with it. If you feed that same snake mice after mice after mice instead of a large rat, it doesn't need to grow.
The pinhead syndrome, yeah?
Yeah, pinhead syndrome. I mean, that's the only difference. I mean, like, it doesn't really matter. But
remember the big old discussions on Aussie Pythons about the pinhead? Man, we used to these conversations we used to have on Aussie Pythons, and that just doesn't exist anymore. That information's lost.
But that was the reasoning behind it, because they're going, "Oh, I'm feeding it, 3 times a week. You'll still get the same amount of food volume into it, so to speak, but you're feeding it, 3 40-gram mice, as opposed to feeding it 120-gram rat." if that makes sense. Once in the same time.
I've certainly gone back to just weekly feeding, and the biggest meal that it will comfortably eat that leaves a good sized lump in it once a week. That's how anything I've got is growing at the best rate for me. So
Faye says something. I don't know. I must have missed what she's asking. Thought that was a myth. What was the myth, Faye?
Pinhead syndrome, probably.
I've dropped something here and I'm looking for it. I can't find it. But I'll find it later.
But it is the thing. It's just like from feeding small things. As the snake grows and gets obviously older, the head will develop. But I've seen it in stuff myself, where you feed something, it's fussy feed. Only, how many times have you had a python that you're having a bugger of a time getting off mice, but its siblings are smashing down rats? You're feeding it 4 mice, whereas the other ones are getting rats, and they actually seem to grow better on rats. You feed rats the same size or same weight capacity, so this weight volume. Once you get them on rats, they power along.
Can I touch on one of the other questions that's gone past? There was one mentioned about, all the morphs and all the designer carpets that are out there, and why they're still on license. This is something I'm quite personally passionate about.
Let me just read the whole question because it cut off for some reason. Hang on. Michael Reynolds asks, sorry, Brent, I just wanted to ask something. Is your room too hot, Brent? You can put on your air conditioner if you want, mate. You look like you're struggling.
Coming, mate. 28.5 is getting up there, mate. I'm starting to struggle.
I've got the fan going here to keep
it on, mate. I don't mind. I think your noise suppression will handle it. Don't stress. Put on your air conditioner. You don't want you sweating and you look uncomfortable there. That's why I can see you sweating and you're looking up the air conditioner.
This room's a perfect hot box.
Michael Reynolds asks, at what point do we have a good argument to push to take all these hybrid morphs off license? Surely the current system is no longer fulfilling its intended purpose. No one is poaching an albino Murray jag from the wild.
Yes, so, Michael, this is something I'm quite passionate about. I often, if you ever see me comment on Facebook, which I don't do too much, but it's usually to get in on that sort of thing. Anyway, to me, like the licensing system, I understood it. It was fine when it was introduced, but it's incredibly outdated. And we've got these politicians and other political parties that are pushing against keepers, not just in the reptile world, but in the bird world and the fish world as well, who are trying to stop so many things changing, and often for the better. In my opinion, anyway. I think, if you're not familiar, the licensing system was put in as a sort of a safeguard against species going extinct, more or less. And as he says, all these morphs and albinos and all the other morphs, they're not natives. All the crossbreds and all this sort of thing. Why on earth? I don't know about other states, but certainly in New South Wales, we have to have all of that on license. And in 2017. Some of you might remember, we had a massive meeting where we went to the national parks that get quite a lot of the carpet pythons, Antaresia, and many of the common R1, what we call R1 animals, taken off license, and it was almost pushed through, and then it all just died. So, again, there's these parties behind the scenes that are trying to block all this sort of thing, but the vast majority of keepers do want all of that stuff taken off license. So yeah.
You wrote an article. Tell them where to go and have a look at that article that you wrote. Have you got it on your website?
Yeah, well, it's in the it's on my website. You can go and look on my website. It's there. It was published in one of the reptile magazines.
Let me see if I can. So what was that article called again? What did you have the title on that article? I'll see if I can find it.
I think it's called Morph It or Leave It.
Okay, I'll see if I can find it and I'll stick it in the link there. Rob Sullivan says something. I haven't seen Rob in a while. Hello, Rob.
Yeah,
Rob.
Rob says, hey guys, I believe the smaller feed items will digest quicker than a larger feed item, in return gaining weight faster with less waste. That's a good point.
Possibly.
They use
digestion is usually based on temperature.
Or leave it. What did you say?
Size.
What did you say that article was called again?
Morph It or Leave It, I think.
Morph It or Leave It.
Yeah, I think so. I wrote it a few years ago now. I can't remember. I've got a few articles there actually.
That's when the first time I noticed. That's the first time I noticed your writing. Your skills as
He said leave it. I'm not sure if she's talking about the article or BHP's for you, Andy. I'm not sure which one she's.
Here we go.
You're only doing that because Faye's watching, and you're trying to, be her best buddy. You're trying to steal her away from me.
BFFs, bro.
Yes, here it is. It's morph it or leave it in, what was it called? In defense of unnatural selection.
Yeah. See, the reason, like, I've been in the hobby a long time, but I've probably sort of, I don't know, come to people's attention a bit more because, for many years I used to keep diamond pythons and I used to breed only locality. I was like a purist. I was a naturalist. I didn't like morphs. I didn't like crossbreeding. I was very much like, pretty much the same animals had to come from under the same rock kind of thing. I was like, that's how I was. And there's still a lot of people out there that are like that. But the thing is, after breeding diamond pythons for many years, I still had my original founding stock, and I would look at all these hatchlings I'd been growing up over the years and breeding back together, and I started to realize how different they looked to the original parents, and I realized that I was naturally selecting what I believed was the best looking animal. So they didn't look anything like their wild counterparts anymore. Like I remember the father was wild caught and the mother was like first generation captive bred. So these were very, very, local specific. They were, Gosford diamonds, whatever. Anyway, and then I started going, you know what? I'm not really a naturalist while I'm keeping all these animals in captivity and in enclosures and selectively selecting what I believe is the prettiest, And then I went, you know what, I'm just going to do the same as everyone else and start looking at morphs and things. And I got my head around like mutations because that was still a bit of a, an unknown thing to me. But once you get your head around how recessive and codominant and all that work, I was like, man, we're doing no different to what dog people and bird people and even cat people have been doing for hundreds and thousands of years. I mean, it's really no different. So then I just started moving into morphs and producing nice looking animals, and I guess that probably also caught like people like yourselves attention, so yeah.
Hashtag more for the win.
Yeah. 100%.
I remember those days of locality specific. All of a sudden you used to have like Palmerston jungles, Atherton tablelands, or honey jungles as what Steve used to call them.
We shouldn't go down this path.
But then it was like, locality specific. All of a sudden, Cairns had 300 different locales of jungles. It was like,
I remember.
this beach, that beach. This street had a locale of jungle. That one over there, it was like everything was a locale jungle. Like, holy shit. Like, there's 10 locales in a 5-kilometre square radius.
Yep.
I know what you're saying, Daz. It gets a bit how you're going in that sense, but some people like that. Some people really want. They want. Actually, I remember buying some off one guy who had GPS locations of where he found his stock. So you could look up exactly where it came from, and things like that. So, yeah,
that was kosher, wasn't it? Huh?
Yeah.
But you're right.
Anyway.
Unless you've got a 1,000 square metre aviary, and you've got 150 diamonds in there that you've picked randomly from your local area, and let them do what they do naturally. As soon as you get a pair, you're line breeding because it's 100%. Nature. You have a clutch of 20, they all hatch out. You go, wow, that's really nice. Yeah. Automatically, you've line bred. It's no longer wild. Yeah. It's now a line bred animal. It's now, it might be from that area, but it's specifically bred for a trait. Not that there's anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's nice to keep animals pure. Like, I don't cross species for no reason. It's only when there's a genetic trait that I want to introduce for something.
I was almost waiting for. I was hearing you say I don't cross, and then I was like, "What is he saying?" And then for no reason.
I'm not going to cross a diamond with a Murray Darling for the sake of putting a diamond and a Murray Darling together. I'd rather put a diamond to a diamond and a Murray to a Murray. But if it's a silver pepper to a diamond, and I want to do it for a specific reason, okay, that's different, but it's a genetic trait involved there. So I'm introducing a pattern with different colours. So
back to the licensing thing, though, after 30, 40 years of us in this hobby and longer in many other hobbies, that have licenses, a lot of these animals are no longer native per se. They might have stemmed from native stock, but, they've been line bred and changed, modified, morphed, mixed, whatever. None of that's going back into the wild, so I think the licensing thing is very outdated. And I'm certainly not saying let's get rid of the licensing, because I think things like large monitors and elapids and all that absolutely need to be on a licensed system and need to be monitored to some degree. But I think keeping a bloody eastern blue tongue, and then maybe even breeding it, do we really need to have all these records of who you sold it to and, all these sorts of things? Yeah.
But I think that's why they were trying to move so many like class 1 species to off license, because the same could be said, for the person that wants to have a children's python, a coastal carpet python, or a singular of anything.
That's what they did 5 years ago in Victoria. I remember going to the VHS Expo, and they were bringing out this new online record book, this online system for Victoria. It's now 5 years later, and it's still not been implemented.
Yeah,
it's not hard. I mean, at some point you have to trust people to migrate over to a new system. Of course, there'll always be guys that will try and push their luck with fixing their books and stuff, because that's just part of our industry, But you have to get it to a point where you make it easier for people to do their licensing. Take this shit off that doesn't need licensing, like bearded dragons. Why? Blue tongues. Why? Carpets and Antaresia. Why are those things even on the book? And make it, streamline it so it's across the board, it should have always been a national system.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Keeping. So everybody's the same everywhere, and they've got full transparency of what goes on in every state.
It's funny because when they released animals into New South Wales pet shops, they didn't put Stimsons on the list. Now, there's no lack of Stimsons in the hobby than there is children's or Max, right? But when national parks look at the locality of Simpson's pythons, they're rare and endangered in New South Wales because they've only ever been found in the top left-hand corner of New South Wales, towards Cameron's Corner. So therefore, they consider them to be endangered in New South Wales. So we don't want to put them on the shopkeeper's license, because that could encourage people to go poach them.
Poaching.
I mean, who's going to drive all the way out there when you can buy them? If you want to buy them in bulk, you'll buy them cheap enough.
That's right. We're going out trying to find some. And then what about this, Gaz? What about crossbred? Let's just take for example the Stimson thing. What if it's crossbred with a spotted? Does that mean I can sell it to a pet shop because it's 50% spotted? I mean,
depends on how honest you want to be with the pet shop.
Well, exactly though. But this is where the licensing thing sort of breaks down. If they look spotted, I'll just sell them as spotteds. If the pet shop's happy to take them and maybe tell the customer that they're a mixed breed of some kind, but got spotted in them,
Well, that's the purist thing coming out, because that was, and I understand a lot of purists used to get the shits because they're like, well, how do you know it's pure? Because you could do this or that, and like you just said, that one looks more like a stimmy and not a Mac or children's or whatever. I'm going to sell it as a stimmy. I always be honest with what I sell. I don't see the point of.
Absolutely, I tell everybody what they're getting. But
you're 100% right, though. You put a marble children's over a blonde Mac.
I just have to say, Brent, put on that air conditioner, please, mate.
You're making me hot.
I'm sitting here and I'm drinking coffee because Victoria's ice cold today.
It's only 28.7. We haven't reached 29 yet.
29 is aircon on, yeah?
No, we've got to get to 30.5 before this room turns on. So we've got a while to go yet.
So this question builds in nicely into what we discussed earlier, Andy, about your new range of reptile. For those of you who don't know, Fuzzy Fox is the man now that had brought out Australia's first synthetic. It's not synthetic. It's biological. How would you? I'll read the question first. So James Bindoff wrote us a novel